Hi everyone, welcome back to another tutorial where I show you my watercolor painting process and techniques that I use in my sketchbook. Today I'm painting succulents and cactuses, which is a requested tutorial, and I'm excited to share my painting process. If you missed my last video from the series, check the link in the description box. I couldn't find one specific reference photo that I like to use for this painting, so I designed the composition myself. I used several photos and some of my real plants to sketch the drawing. I will link the photos in the description box if you decide to use them. I think it's a lot of fun to design your own compositions instead of copying just one photo, so definitely give it a try. To transfer the drawing to my watercolor sketchbook, I'm using tracing paper cut out in the size of my sketchbook. I'm creating an outline of the sketch with my mechanical pencil. The size of the pencil doesn't really matter. The point of this exercise is to simplify the drawing so it's easier to paint. Now that I created the outline of the drawing, I'm going to shade the back side to transfer it to my watercolor sketchbook. I'm doing it lightly with my number 2 pencil, which I usually use in this process. To trace the drawing, I'm using a ballpoint pen. I like to use a ballpoint pen because it doesn't rip the delicate paper. Also, to make sure the tracing paper doesn't move, I'm going to tape it to the sketchbook. Now that I transfer the drawing to my watercolor paper, I'm erasing some of the lines because I think they're a little bit too dark. It looks like the outline going to be a little bit difficult to see on camera, but I hope it's still going to be fine. For the watercolors, I'm using St. Petersburg palette, Nevskaya Palitra, and this little mixing tray. Because this drawing is pretty small, I'm going to use small brushes and some detail brush eventually. As for the colors, I'm using cadmium, yellow, some greens. Also, I'm going to use indigo and a little bit of violet or purple. And I will let you know if I use any other colors as I go along. I start my painting by doing a wash of yellow color. I'm painting with a very light yellow all over my succulent, and in some places I thin out the yellow with more water. I let the water soak into the paper by working on other areas of the composition. For my cactus, I'm going to do the same thing, wet the paper, add a little bit of cadmium yellow wash. For smaller plants, I'm going to leave them as is for now. I'm taking the brightest green that I have in my palette called yellow green and doing another wash all over the plant. This green does add a little bit of glow to the plant, but I like that effect. Now I'm doing the same thing on each cactus. Just to note, the light source is coming from the right side, so all the shadows will be on the left. To work on my smaller plants, I'm going to mix cadmium yellow with sap green. You can see the color that I get here. I'm doing a pretty thin wash of the green color. While the plants are drying, I'm going to work on my pot. Before starting on the plant pot, make sure to switch out your water. For my pot here, I'm going to use my squirrel paintbrush, which is size number 5. It soaks up the water pretty well. I'm loading the paintbrush with clear water and painting all over the plant pot. If you use too much water like I did here, wipe some of it with paper towel. I'm going to use mainly indigo to paint the bowl with a little bit of cadmium yellow and also a little bit of red. Here I'm mimicking the bowl's ridges and little shadows that I see in the picture. I'm mixing indigo with yellow and a little bit of red to get the warmer grayish shadow. My plants are not fully dry yet, but the water has thoroughly soaked into the paper, which is a perfect time to come back and paint them. The process of painting leaves is actually pretty simple. I'm going to use the green I mixed previously to paint the edges of each leaf. Then I'm wiping my brush with paper towel, washing the paintbrush with water, and then using my clean brush to soften the edges of the leaves. Another technique for this is to use 2 brushes. And that's what I'm going to do because this process is pretty repetitive and I would like to simplify the process. I'm going to use my detail brush to lay down the dark lines, then use another clean wet brush to soften the edges. To paint a cactus, I'm going to use a similar technique, but with a bigger and softer brush. I'm using my squirrel brush because it will create a softer lines. I'm painting the shadow areas of the cactus with dark green I used for my succulent, and then wiping my brush and softening the edges. For the other plants, I'm switching back to a smaller brush, but this time I'm going to paint the shadow areas of the plants, but leave the shapes as is without softening the lines. In other words, we want to keep the shapes separate and not blended like we did before. That way we create the three-dimensional quality of the leaves. Now I'm going to add another layer of paint all over the composition to darken the shadows, create more contrast and dimension of the plants. As you can see, I'm working on the shadows of each leaf. The color that I'm using here is green mixed with a little bit of indigo. I'm also going to use the violet pigment from my palette to create the purple edges that I see in my succulent leaves. The technique is very similar to my previous one. I'm laying down a line of purple and then softening the lines with a clean wet brush. As the paper dries, some of the pigment disappears. So in order to recreate the missing contrast and dimension, I'm painting another dark layer to deepen the shadows. The pot looks too light compared to the plants, so we're going to create depth as well, add shadow that is falling from the pot. Again, I'm using indigo with a little bit of cadmium yellow and red for my shadows. As for my cactus needles, I'm going to use yellow ochre as well as dark green for some of the needles. As you can see here, I'm continuing to add more details and darkening of shadows where I feel like is lacking in the painting. As always, I can continue adding and refining the painting even more, but I think for now this is good. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you like the format of this video and if these tutorials are helpful. Also, I would like to know what other watercolor tutorials you would like to see. Please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!